we as human beings have the capability to be sacred individuals who can elevate ourselves to do angelic things, to do kindness beyond what we can imagine, but we're also capable of brutality that we can't even imagine.
Welcome to More Than a Movie, American Me, a podcast that digs into the history and mystery of American Me, a film directed by and starring Edward James Olmos that had a huge impact on Latino cinema and culture. I'm your host, Alex Fumero, and I'll be diving into the behind-the-scenes controversy. Every episode, I'm going to try to peel back a layer of the story by trying to go deeper into the intentions and motives behind the film and the backlash 30 years later. On today's episode, we're talking about actor Sal Lopez, who plays Montoya's father, Pedro, in the film. Sal Lopez always fantasized about becoming an actor, even before he knew what it meant. He'd eventually go on to star in movies like Full Metal Jacket and Selena, and TV shows like Barry, Queen of the South, The Shield, and NYPD Blue. And for the gamers, you've heard his voice in Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption. But amongst Latinos in Hollywood, he's also well known as a founding member of Latino Theater Company, which developed the careers of many big screen talents like actress Lupe Ontiveros of Selena and playwrights Jose Rivera and Quería Alegría Judes of Motorcycle Diaries and In the Heights, respectively. It's where our episode 2 guest, Rafael Agustin, got his first professional experience that led him to meet and eventually work with Edward James Olmos. It's definitely a big reason Sal Lopez ended up playing Montoya Santana's father in American Me. That crew of regulars that the puppets mentioned in their episode that surrounded Edward James Olmos, Sal was one of them.
I was raised here in Los Angeles, South Central LA, in the Florence area, and I never really, I fantasized about acting. I loved going to the movies. I just loved it.
He loved going to the movies, spending like 50 cents on a ticket, a quarter for 5 candy bars, and basically just dream. He saw all kinds of movies with his family, especially Spanish language ones, but he was most inspired by the epics.
I must have been like 8 years old, and we went to go see Jason and the Argonauts. They had me at the Jason and the Argonauts.
Like we've heard from Jacob Vargas and pretty much everybody else on this podcast, a career in Hollywood wasn't an obvious choice for Sal Lopez either, even for a kid who grew up in LA. His mom was a homemaker and his father was a shipping clerk at a furniture store, both immigrants from Mexico. And also like Jacob Vargas, Sal's way into entertainment started with dance. In his case, baile folclórico, or Mexican folk dance. Eventually, some of his dance friends, including a girl he liked, encouraged him to come audition for this play that was about Chicanos like him. Sal had no idea about acting.
I had no idea. I saw people, going over their lines in the parking lot, and I said to my now wife and girlfriend then, or friend, I said, look at those guys talking to themselves in the parking lot. And she says, that's nothing. There's girls in the bathroom and they're crying. But they were going over their scenes, what did I know?
But this play was written in a kind of Chicano slang that Sal had grown up with.
I didn't have to pretend, I knew what it was. And so I did it, and the director said, oh, he'll learn.
The play was called Zoot Suit. I'm guessing you guys are seeing a pattern here. Edward James Olmos, first leading role, Zoot Suit. Danny De La Paz and Daniel Villarreal both decided to pursue acting because they saw Zoot Suit. Probably this very production, actually. And now Sal's career as an actor is starting with Zoot Suit. Why does that matter? Because that play is about the same things as American Me is about, essentially, and American Me doesn't exist without it. Sal's even in a scene at the beginning of the movie that takes place during the Zoot Suit riots.
Okay, got a problem being on the streets. Wearing your colors. Get rid of your tacuches, ¿me entiendes, Mendes?
Who knows if Edward James Olmos even becomes as obsessed with doing Latino-themed work if he hadn't started his career with such an overtly political and raza-oriented piece like Zoot Suit. So anyway, Sal continues doing plays and movies and hanging out in the Chicano theater scene, becoming something of a fixture. He does this movie version of Zoot Suit, which leads to a bunch of guest spots on legendary TV shows like Different Strokes, Chips, Hill Street Blues. In 1985, he co-founds the Latino Theater Company. In 1987, he's cast in Full Metal Jacket. So by the time casting began for American Me in 1991, Sal's on everybody's list. But career-wise, things had begun slowing down for him.
I actually auditioned for Taylor Hackford's film first.
Blood In, Blood Out.
Right. And I auditioned for one of the main roles, and I didn't get it. And then they offered me a smaller role. And I, at the time, actually, I really needed the job, actually.
Yeah.
I was, and it had been a dry spell, and I really needed the job. But I just didn't, I felt like, wow, they're going to offer me this instead of, one of these more, I really felt like, anyway.
So you're saying Hollywood at the time was not just, there wasn't an abundance of roles for Latino actors at the time? That's shocking to me.
Times are changing.
Yeah. Are they? I hope they are.
I think they are. I really do. But so anyway, as destiny would have it, I did turn that down, and then Eddie's his screenplay, they had a table read, and they invited me to be part of that, and that was how I got involved with that. It was a great experience on that, the whole casting thing for me, because I was going to play his father, and I was a young man back then, very young, and I thought, well, how are we going to do this? So
because I feel like Edward James Olmos has looked 45 since he was 15 years old.
Yeah,
like that's the vibe.
You're right. You're right. He hasn't
There's
changed
parts
much.
in the movie where it's like him and his little brother, and I'm like, that's your son, right? Like that's your son, and he's not that old in the movie, but he just has that gravitas.
Yeah, it's true. But they brought in older actors to play, his dad as an older, and we had screen tests, and it was really it was interesting because we all screen tested at the same time, the older actors and me as a young man. Then they put some superficial makeup, and after the auditions, they said, no, we're just going to have Sal do it, and we're going to put makeup on him. And that's how it ended up happening.
To me, it makes sense in the movie. Like, I never once stopped in the movie and said, this is weird, that guy's too young to be. Because the point is, he's not born yet, right? And that's a critical kind of like twist. In
the beginning of the movie.
Yes, right? So there's like, you fit that. I feel like it's easier to age you up than have someone look younger.
It wasn't that easy.
No, it wasn't. No. What did you have to do?
Well,
first of all, how old were you?
I must have been in my early 30s, I think, when I did it. Yeah, and Ken Diaz, who's an Oscar-nominated makeup artist, he was the head makeup guy, and we did the first time we put on the makeup. It took 15 hours in the chair. Yeah, 15 hours. They did a whole cast of my head and my face and the whole thing. So anyway, the first time they applied it, because, all the prosthetics, it took a long time. It always takes time, but this was...
I can't believe they used prosthetics. That's like so involved.
Well, they had to, because, I really needed to age. And what happened was, because they put on so much makeup the first time, we couldn't do close-ups on me. It was just, the prosthetic just looked too artificial. And then we had to... taper it down and make it look more natural, and we finally got it right after a few times, and it was less time, But the table read was really great because most of the actors that were in the film were in the table read, and Eddie was really passionate about the project, and it was I just admire him so much because he had a vision, and he was able to just create that vision that he wanted and really take the reins and be a leader and take this on. It was pretty major.
He never directed before.
Not that I know of. No. But yeah, and he was great. He was great because he was an actor. So
yeah.
So it was I remember his favorite phrase was, just throw it away. Just throw it away.
It was it is an exceptionally naturally acted film. There's just, like some of I was almost like, did he just find real people, at certain times? But then when you look at the credits, you're like, no, these are actors who are they're just killing it,
There were a few, who were not, but, they were right. They were right for the parts. So it worked.
Do you remember your first day on set?
I do remember. No, I do remember the first day on set. The first day on set was the 15-hour thing.
Right.
And it took all day, and then we shot that night. And it's the first time that Eddie sees his dad once he's out of the joint, you know.
Wow.
And that was the first thing we shot.
The scene Sal's talking about is one where Santana sees his estranged father Pedro outside of a wedding party on the street. There's a lot of weighted silences. Then Santana asks,
Pedro?
Santana.
I got home a couple hours ago.
I know.
If it bothers you, I won't stay.
Coming up, we'll hear more about Sal's experiences on set with Edward James Olmos and his reaction when he heard about the murders. Welcome back to More Than a Movie. I'm Alex Fumero, and we're talking to actor Sal Lopez. Sal's about to tell us what it was like to just be a regular kid from LA who's suddenly acting in movies.
But I'll tell you, one of the things that was really cool that happened to me was I was on the, Universal lot. And I'm walking on, the Universal lot. And of course, I'd been there, for the Universal Studios tour.
Uh-huh.
And suddenly one of the tour buses come by, tour, whatever. And it's full of tourists. And I'm like, wow, I'm in the lot and look at these people.
Yeah.
And then somebody in the tour bus goes, hey, Sal. And I go, hey. And it was someone I knew. They were on the tour,
I love it.
That was so cool. It was like, hey, what are you doing here? I said, I'm doing a movie.
So
yeah, that was amazing.
it's something that doesn't really happen to a lot of actors in Hollywood. Being recognized, not because you're famous or somebody saw you on TV, but because you're just a dude from the neighborhood. We forget sometimes that LA is an industry town. What Pittsburgh was for steel or Miami was for, cocaine, Los Angeles is for entertainment. The only difference is that regular working class people from those cities get jobs working for the town mill or at a bank laundering money for Pablo Escobar, as the case may be. But in LA, if you're a regular working class Latino kid, you're not just knocking on the doors of Universal Studio asking for a gig. That creates this really unique situation where the actors involved in American Me have a lived experience of life on the streets of LA, including gangs, that you wouldn't get with many other kinds of movies. Here's Sal again.
Absolutely. I mean, I grew up in South Central LA, so that was nothing foreign to me. It was something that I saw, that I can't say I was in a gang personally, but people very close to me were. And so I knew that life. And, it's complicated, right? Because these things go back many, many years, and it's a culture. So, it's also something that's, it's a cancer in our community. It's something that, it's an issue, right, that we have to deal with, and that is in our community like it is in many other communities.
Of course. Is that something that you knew? We've heard from several people. We interviewed the Dannies, the puppets.
Oh yeah, yeah, of course.
And they were talking to us, as was Antoinette Levine and some other folks about. It's just like from day one, Edward James Olmos was like on a mission, and it wasn't just to make a great movie. It was
absolutely.
It was to spread a message.
Absolutely.
And was that evident to you?
It was certainly evident when I walked out of that screening. When I first saw it, I think I was just in shock. I was just so moved, and I thought it was such a powerful film. I think he did what he wanted to do. We're seduced by the glamour, but at the same time, the consequences are evident. And I think it spoke to our community strongly and directly, because in some ways, people might say, well, here we go again. You're just exploiting, our people. And here we are again portraying gangbangers on the screen.
Even though the intention was precisely seemingly the opposite.
Correct.
It was not to glorify.
Correct. I think, look at The Godfather. The Godfather, it's a movie that you could say, yeah, it paints Italians in a bad light, but it's really about a family, right? It's about immigrants, about a family, and it also does not shy away from the consequences.
Sure.
of living that life.
The Godfather is a good comp for American Me in more ways than one. Some Italian Americans were upset being portrayed as gangsters, as Sal points out. American Me, in fact, has a few Godfather references in it. There's a scene where an Italian guy in a hat is gardening, just like Vito and his tomatoes. There's a scene where Santana learns to drive that's basically the opposite of the scene where Michael shows Apollonia how to drive.
Are you sure you've never driven before? Okay.
Why does it do that?
Well, it does that because you got to, like, let the clutch out and push the gas in at the same time.
And by all accounts, members of the Italian mafia were also not happy with the way they were portrayed in the film. Crime boss Joe Colombo, through his political front, the Italian American League, very publicly opposed the film until they reached a compromise with producers to have the word mafia removed from the movie altogether.
The League succeeded in eliminating the words Mafia and Cosa Nostra from the film being made from the best-selling novel The Godfather.
Joe Colombo was the famous fellow who walked into Charlie Bluthorn's office and says, "We don't want to hear the word Mafia mentioned, Cosa Nostra, all those guys." And Charlie Bluthorn said, "Well, boy, whatever you want, we're glad to serve it up."
But unlike The Godfather, Edward James Olmos decided to base his film on a real gang and recognizable figures, even with their names changed. Something several people warned Olmos was a bad idea. The Corleone family was fictional. La M was not. In fact, they were so real that Olmos had to give his cast and crew an out before asking them to shoot in Folsom Prison or gang territory in Boyle Heights. So I asked Sal whether he ever felt in danger while making the movie.
Well, I was not in the scenes in Folsom. I had nothing. I didn't really had to deal with that aspect of it.
But you were in like Ramona Gardens. And,
in the places that I was involved with, I really didn't interact with the real life, cons and all that kind of thing. It was not on my radar.
Yeah.
Let me just put it that way.
Yeah.
I read the script, and the script for me was what he wanted to present, and my job was to do my part. And I didn't feel, intimidated or anything like that. I mean, I was focused on doing the work and making a good film. And I think that, everything else, I mean, I don't want to speak about.
Yeah. I understand. Oof. I mean, I get it. Sal's a professional. He's also friends with Olmos. And like pretty much everybody else on this movie, he didn't want to get into the ugly parts, but I mean, you can hear the trepidation and tension in his answer and probably in my response. Because sitting in a room with him, I could tell this was very uncomfortable territory. It also wasn't part of his experience on that set, he claims, and I take him at his word. After the break, I try to shift gears a little bit. I asked Sal about a bunch of Chicanos from East LA taking over Les Côtes d'Azur, the French Riviera. Certaines choses que nous devons essayer de vivre. Welcome back to More Than a Movie. I'm Alex Fumero, and we're talking to actor Sal Lopez. Con.
Yeah.
What was it like? What was it like to be there with your fellow
It was pretty magical.
castmates?
Yeah, it was pretty magical. I mean, here we are on the other side of the world, and I remember walking the gauntlet of reporters of paparazzi going up to the day of the screening, and there's Danny, Evelina, myself, and Eddie, and Bob Young, who was the producer and who had been there before. I mean, he was an awardee of the Palme d'Or for a film several years earlier, Alambrista. Mm-hmm. And so anyway, so we're there, and we start to. I'm assuming Eddie's gonna walk ahead, and we're gonna walk behind him.
Yeah.
But he didn't do that. He wanted us all to be arm in arm.
Yeah.
And walk together. It was pretty remarkable, that he wanted to share that with us. I'm still aghast of it, but it was the most unbelievable feeling. we were walking through this on this red carpet, and as I said, I mean, there's literally hundreds of paparazzi on both sides and security and everything, and it was an amazing feeling. And
for a kid from South Central,
yeah, exactly.
cool.
And all these people are screaming, Eddie, 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 and the sound of the flashing cameras, because it was cameras back then, right? It's just like an amazing sound when you're hearing so many going off at the, it's just like, and the flashes, and it's just pretty amazing. So we walked this gauntlet, right? And it felt like 100 yards, but I'm sure it wasn't that long. But finally we get to the stairs right before we go in the theater. And as we're going up the stairs, they're playing the music, and it's Oye Como Va from Santana. And it's just like something out of a movie itself.
It's amazing.
That moment was something out of a movie. And then we turn around, right? We all turn around. It's almost like slow motion. And the music's playing, bum, 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 bum. And it was magical. It was magical.
And do you remember the reception the film got there?
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think Eddie should have won hands down, for whatever, political reasons, I'm sure, whatever, that exists everywhere. But there's no doubt. I mean, look at the film. I mean, it still holds up. It's still seen. It's still respected. It should have won.
I would say more so, right? Like that's one of the things about American Me is that it's become like a cult classic,
a staple for sure. Yeah.
When I talk to young,
classic, yes.
like friends my age or younger here who grew up in LA, they're like, oh yeah, they know every character, they know every scene.
Yeah.
One.
What I meant to say is he should have won. He should have won for first time director.
Of course, yeah.
That's what he was nominated for.
One anecdote that we heard from Danny when we were talking to him about Cannes was that he recalls that as being the place where he found out about Ana Lizárraga.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, we did get that. The news then. Yeah. How
did you take that?
Well, it was sad. It was sad. What can I tell you? It was alarming. Yeah.
Do you remember how you came to find out there?
Yeah, we were sitting in the cinema, and they came in and notified us.
In the movie?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Did you know Anna well from the movie?
No, just from the film. I didn't really know her now. But, it was, it was unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but any part of that reaction going, is it gonna get weird for me when I go back?
I mean, not really. I didn't. I was not involved in that world, so I didn't think it would affect me.
Right. So you don't. I take it you don't give much credence to the idea that the film had anything to do with her.
I don't know.
You don't know, right? I mean, to be honest, neither do I. Which is why, Yeah,
I don't know.
The other thing with this podcast is trying to, there was this whole Danny. There's a lot of Dannys involved in this, by the way. There was a Danny Trejo autobiography and GQ story, and he's gone on a few podcasts and sort of told this version of his experience with American Me, and his kind of claim that due to his knowledge and association of some of the people that this was based off of, that up to 9, 10, 11 people may have been killed in connection with the making of the film as retribution for some sort of participation, and that Lizárraga certainly was, like, as a consultant on the film, that was part of the result. So part of what we're trying to do here is also piece together how much of that is true and how much of it isn't, and whether you can. And I think more importantly, the why, if it is, right? Like, what is it about this movie that's so powerful, for lack of a better word, that could elicit potentially a response like that from the people that it was based on?
I just worked with Danny. We just did a movie in Oklahoma, actually.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I don't know. You probably would have to ask him. I have no idea.
Who? Ask Danny?
Yeah.
I'm less interested in the whodunit aspect of it, and I'm more interested in the why done it. I'll give you an example. I look at the scenes that depict sexual violence. And there's obviously, you're in a very prominent scene in the beginning of the movie in the Zoot Suit, right? But then we have the scene shortly after where Santana's character is sexually assaulted in juvenile hall. According to Trejo, that was part of the impetus for why La M was so upset. That this idea that someone who would become the boss of a gang could never have become a leader in one of these gangs had that happen to you. And certainly I've even heard that part of like kind of the code of the rules of the Mexican mafia, like homosexuality is looked down upon. But even outside of gang life, I feel like machismo and homophobia have played a pretty big role in Latino culture as a whole. How do you feel those elements of sexual assault should have been taken by the audience as a whole, knowing that some of the target audience are folks within this community that have these kind of machista and homophobic points of view? How is that intended to come across, do you think?
I think it's the brutality of prison and the brutality of being in that world. Maybe it's not based on fact. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But certainly, in film, it's not real. Mm. You say it's based on a true story because you're able to take licenses and create because you want to make a point. You want to create drama. You want to have an impact. You want to shock the audience. You want to make them think.
Right.
You want, to create a film that's going to be memorable, scenes that are going to be shocking and memorable, etc. So it's done all the time where, you see things, and you say, this did not happen. Yeah, it may or may not have happened, but it leaves you with, it serves the purpose, which is to show you the brutality of the life and how we as human beings have the capability to be sacred individuals who can elevate ourselves to, angelic, to do angelic things, to do kindness beyond, what is we can imagine, but we're also capable of brutality that we can't even imagine.
Yeah. I truly love Sal Lopez for this answer. The dude is not only profound, he got to the heart of my question, which was less about the sensationalized aspect of the story and more about the human side. And that dichotomy and contradiction of angelic things and brutality speaks to me of the humanity of not only the characters involved in the movie. Have they done harmful things? I don't think they'd even deny that. But are they monsters? I don't think so. It's the problem of a movie like American Me that wants to demonize a lifestyle, but also does such a good job in humanizing the characters. It ultimately draws viewers to them as much or more than it puts them off the life path. What were the responses that you personally got from like the people that you grew up with about this movie?
Well, one of my brothers was a little bit involved in the life for a little bit of time, and he to this day just loves that movie.
Okay.
He loves the movie, I
don't think that was the intention, of the film, but
I mean, I think what he likes about it is that it portrays the life in the aspects of that life that are true, and so I think, and the takeaways from that life as well, and I think that says a lot. It's the stamp of approval for me, and the fact that there are still so many, as you say, people who follow the film, who are, the next generation is rediscovering this film. It stands the test of time. In a way, it's good, but in a way, it's unfortunate because it's still relevant.
Right.
And so I think there's a, ambivalence there for me.
On the next episode, I'm speaking to Milton Grimes, attorney for Mexican Mafia member Joe Morgan, who was the basis for the character JD in American Me.
He had to go into seclusion because there was alleged threats on his life. A couple of people were killed because of the production of that movie, depicting Joe Morgan in a non-complimentary fashion, or saying that certain things happened to him that they didn't appreciate because it challenged his manhood and his sexual preference or sexuality, or maybe he was a victim portrayed.
That's on the next episode of More Than a Movie, American Me. More Than a Movie, American Me is a production of Exile Content Studios in partnership with iHeart's My Cultura podcast network and Trojan Horse Media. The show is produced by me, Alex Fumero, at Angry Yuka on the internets, and our senior producer is Nigel Dwara. Our executive producers are Rose Reed, Nando Vila, and Kareem Tapsh. Production assistance from Sabine Jansen, Anna Octavio, and Stella Emmett. Mixing and sound design by Eduardo Albornoz. Our executive producers at iHeart are Giselle Bances and Arlene Santana. For more podcasts, listen to the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.